bring you a jar of jam and a pie.
Oh,
That's exactly what it meant.
Yes, that's the clear interpretation. No, that's not. I'm all for that.
I didn't think you'd turn it
No,
down.
I'm not going to turn it down. I don't think that's what this is
That
saying.
would be a special blessing.
That would be a special blessing. Yeah.
As unto the Lord.
Yes, as a Lord. All right, middle paragraph on page 4.
Brent,
Yes.
one of the other problems that is involved there is that you got poor people in the city, and you got these farms way outside that have no way of getting to them.
Yeah.
But what you tell about your buddy, he took it to them.
Right. Yeah, you know, one of the things, I was saying this yesterday, that I think when you start to think like he's thinking, that, you know, it's not just about how can I facilitate others to participate in Torah? How can I think outside the boxes to the spirit of this? That you start to, I'll give you an example of that, Matthew 5:17. It's fascinating because if you read Exodus 30, it says every male has to bring a half shekel. But the first time I heard, these guys are always humbling me with their little statements. They all make these little statements, and it's just kind of like, wow, these are Orthodox people. And it was Reuben who said to me, he says, you know, everybody's a half shekel. I'm a half shekel, you're a half shekel, doesn't matter who you are, we're all just one half shekel. So it lowers, it puts everybody on the same, that's the beauty of the Shabbat. The beauty of the Shabbat was this: the man who owned the land and the man who worked the land on that day were the same. There was equality. It brought equality to everyone. Now the next day, on the social scale, they were back down here. For the Shabbat, it leveled it out. He ceased working, and he didn't work. So Reuben says everybody's a half shekel. But if you look at Exodus chapter 30, where it tells us you have to bring the half shekel, it doesn't say that anybody else can pay the half shekel for you. However, it doesn't say somebody can't pay the half shekel for you. So Yeshua says to Peter, hey Peter, go cast a hook into the water, take the first fish that comes up, and that fish will have a coin in its mouth. Go and give that shekel for you and for me. It'll pay both of our temple tax. And Yeshua pays Peter's temple tax. So nothing says that you can't help somebody else out. Nothing says, for instance, that I can't take a sacrifice on your behalf. I can actually take a sacrifice to the temple on your behalf. Paul does this for those who are completing the Nazirite vow. He actually pays their Nazirite vow, the animals for their Nazirite vow. I'm allowed to bring an animal for you. Now it's going to be on your behalf, so that you can be obedient. But I can bring it for you. Nothing says I can't do that. See, when you start to think like that, when you start to think, okay, how do I help others participate in this? It's not just about me participating in it. How do I help other people participate in this?
Isn't that the heart of Torah?
That's the heart of Torah. It's the very heart of Torah. Is to think outside the box and say, if they won't come to my fields, I'll take my fields to them. Everybody's a half shekel. Everybody's a half shekel, and I'll pay their half shekel. When you start thinking like that, I think you're moving in the directions that Torah desires for everybody to go. Last thing here, middle paragraph, really quick. Verse 20 to 23 of our text deals with the angel of the Lord that we have seen before in Exodus 3:2 and 14:19. I have argued before that the angel messenger cannot be distinguished from the Lord himself, and this text strengthens my previous assertions. It says, verse 21, tells us the angel was to be obeyed, Shema B'Kol, which is also used elsewhere of our responsibility towards God. Secondly, we are told that the name of God is in him. To have the name of God is the equivalent to his presence, that is, his authority and power. Third, Sarna notes that the word for rebellion against the angel is used mostly in the Hebrew scripture of those who rebel against God. Fourth, note this is key. The syntax equates the two, saying, do what he says and do all that I say. Do what he says and do what I say. Which one is it? Yes. Simply put, the angel of the Lord and Yod-Heh-Vav are so closely linked that from my perspective, they are one and the same. You can't untie them. Do what he says and do what I say in the same breath. Because we're not going to tell you any different. We're going to both tell you the same thing because we're really the same. We have the same essence, person, whatever, however we want to say this. Any questions or comments? Or we have to cut this off. There's a lot of stuff here. This is a huge section. This is a big section with a lot of stuff in it. And this 20, once we had Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments, then 21, 22, and 23 are all about unpacking the 10. Just unpacking them, yes.
I was thinking of that situation where King David is God's will, and he goes to sacrifice to the Lord, and he goes to this other dude, the guy who offered to give David a sacrifice, and David said, no, I'm not going to sacrifice the Lord, it's going to cost me nothing. So he chose to not accept. But do you think that God would have accepted the other guy? You know, since it doesn't want to tell you, do you think it would have been had the same?
Yeah, because I'll give you an example. It says at the opening to the book of Job that Job would offer sacrifices for his children just in case they might have sinned. It tells us repeatedly that he does this. So Job, acting as a priest on behalf of his family, would offer sacrifices on their behalf just in case they might have sinned.
So even though God told him, he was basically telling David to do this, but he didn't specifically say, it has to come from your animal, David. I mean, somebody else could have done it. I see.
Nothing says that a person bringing a sacrifice has to bring a sacrifice from their own animals. We assume that. See, I think the Torah wants us to think this way more often.
Yeah.
That, you know what, I can actually help somebody. This is why people get upset with the fact that it says that those who are maimed or who are, have problems, they have physical deformities. Nothing can come into the temple that has a physical deformity. I told many of you this before. I sat in a Society of Biblical Literature session that was on disabilities. So all these people are either paraplegic, quadriplegic, they have some type of physical disability. And they're all ticked off at the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because he tells them that because of their disability, they can't go in the temple. And how can this be a loving, compassionate God when they're, because of the way that they were born, because of their birth defect, or because of an accident that they had no control over, how can God tell them they can't go into the temple or the tabernacle? This does not seem right. And so these people are in wheelchairs and they're in all kinds of contraptions, and they're like angry. And I'm going to this session, I'm sitting there listening to this going, wow. And I wanted to stand up and say, somebody can go in for you. You don't have to go in. God still loves you, and somebody can take your sacrifice in for you. And oh, by the way, isn't that what Yeshua does for us?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, by the way, somebody with saying your name can come to the priest and say, this is Bob's sacrifice. He can't come in, but he wants to be obedient, so this is me bringing it for him. And that's okay.
Doesn't Paul also pay for the sacrifices?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, in Acts 21, he pays the mega sacrifice of all sacrifices, the collective mega sacrifice for an individual is the Nazarite vow. You have 4 guys who've taken the Nazarite vow. The Nazarite vow has come due and they don't have the animals. They're obligated. Paul says, I'll bring them for you. So he brings, all these animals for these 4 guys. Which is exactly what the Torah is all about. It's fine for somebody. So look, if you can't go in, somebody can go in for you. If you can't pay the half shekel tax, somebody can pay it for you. Substitution. A representative substitute. Welcome to Torah. 1 and 2. Yeah, what?
Well, it sounds like what you're saying in this whole thing, keeping Torah is not an act of work, but is a hard issue.
It's always been a hard issue. Like I I said earlier, if I'm out in the field, if I'm the only guy out in the field, and I drop this stuff, who's going to know if I pick it up? Who's going to know if I reach back? The only one who knows is God. So now I have a responsibility, because of my relationship with God, to say, well, I dropped it. I'll leave it. Oh, look at that. I forgot that whole little row right there. Oh, well, I leave it. I see my neighbor's animal in my field. I just go, you know what? That's his. I'm not messing with it. If that animal dies, I mean, this animal has now been wandering around for a while. It's gotten so tired under its burden that it's just laid down. I say, you know what? That thing dies. That's on him, man. Not my problem. No, I can't not have compassion on that animal. I cannot have compassion on my neighbor. I mean, this guy I don't even like, because you know what? Frankly, the guy's a real problem. So, you know what? If this animal dies, that's his ox. He needs it to plow his field. Forget it. You know? No, I can't do that. I'm not supposed to do that. It's always a hard issue. It's always been a hard issue. Yeah.
Getting back, we're talking about deal with the harvester, to make with God sees us.
Yeah.
Same thing. Now, like this being a Shemitah year, we take the harvest. Well, we can't get people to come to us, but we can take it to a food bank.
Right. Right, absolutely. You may have to do that. You know why? Because we have not, this is what Gershon found, was when he told people that the corners were available, nobody believed him. They had lived so long without the Torah that when finally somebody started applying it, they looked at him like, are you crazy? Are you nuts? Nobody does that. We never heard of anybody doing this. Must be some kind of joke. And sure enough, if we go out there and start trying to take from somebody's field, we'll get arrested for stealing. Even though he was telling everybody, no, I'm being serious. Come to the corners of my field. Take as much as you want from the corners. All four corners. So they're open. Compassion. And the farmer is required to leave, and it's up to this person to determine how much of a corner. By the way, the ruling in Tractate Peah was this. Here was the phraseology. Against such there is no Torah. Okay? Against such we have no Torah. We have no teaching. The Apostle Paul says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, meekness, compassion. Against such there is no Torah. In other words, it was this. It was his way of saying the fruit of the Spirit, interesting enough, using the word fruit. Against such I have no Torah, which was Paul's way of saying, I don't even want to tell you how to quantify this. How do you quantify and put a number on love and joy, all this? This is, show as much of this as you can. There's no cap on this.
In fact, that's demonstrated as you designate part of the corner. How much shows how much of your heart has compassion for those without. If you do a small corner versus a medium or whatever size, that tells you the generosity of your heart.
Right. So here's the takeaway from this. No matter what your profession is, let's say, because somebody said, well, I'm not a farmer. Whatever your profession is, whatever you do to make a living, put it in the vernacular, a portion of what you do for a living should be pro bono to those who are in need. That's you leaving the corner. You should give some of what you do pro bono to those who are in need, who could not afford what you do. They don't have a field. They don't have access to the skills you have. So part of what you do, a percentage, you get to choose that. You get to choose that. Part of what you do, a percentage of it, goes to those who are in need.
I think that's why he keeps reminding us that he brought us out of the land of Egypt. And remember, at one time you too were slaves.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to focus on that.
And that's like the key of this whole section, isn't it?
Yeah, remember that you were, and I didn't have time to focus on it, but it's like you were slaves in Egypt. You were slaves in Egypt. You know what it was like to be a slave. You know what it was like to be oppressed. So don't ever do that to anybody else.
Just remember that when someone says church. I'm serious, you
Yes.
know. I mean, we can have this teaching that if we apply it in a poor way,
I agree.
we push it away.
I agree.